more deaths than either drugs or any of these other things you're talking about. Now, I am not in favor of that.
That's not a moral stand.
It is a moral. No, that's a practical stand.
That's a practical
stand. But my
stand.
moral stand is that I believe that people should be free to commit suicide. If a friend of mine drinks or smokes, I think he's making a mistake. I will try to persuade him not to do it. But I don't think I have the right to force him not to do it.
Right.
So I am on moral grounds opposed to prohibition. However, I go on to say that those moral grounds are reinforced by the pragmatic grounds that trying to prohibit it doesn't work.
You're also opposed to
brief comment from you, then from the other two.
Yes, and then you're also opposed to the free education of children.
I am opposed to, well, we have to be very careful there, because I've written extensively on that, and my views are, I am opposed in the United States to government education of children. I am opposed to having the schools run by the state. I have been in the past and in favor of government assurance that every child, regardless of his income or his background, be able to get schooling. But that doesn't involve running the schools. I've been in favor in the United States of something called a voucher system, under which parents would be free to choose what schools their children go to. And in that sense, first of all, there is no free education. What do you talk about free?
No,
you mean nobody pays for it?
I'm talking about a child of the worker having the same chance to get education as the child of the rich man.
He should have the same chance.
And I'm talking we should not have that kind of system in education as we are having now here in Iceland with your lecture, that the worker would have to work for 2 days in order to get into it, whereas the big businessman can just charge it on his account in the company to get in, because we do not start out. We do not start out from the same position.
Of course not.
No.
I didn't start out from the same position you did.
No, exactly.
I was lucky to be born in the United States. You were lucky to be born in Iceland. We started out from different positions. But those societies that have tried to carry out the views you're now expressing are the societies of misery, of tyranny, of slavery. The ideas you're expressing are the ideas that were expressed by the leaders of the Soviet Union. They were the ideas that were expressed by the leaders of China. They are the ideas that have been expressed in every country that has sought to go down the direction you're describing, has ended up with tyranny and misery. You have in those states greater inequality in practice between the top and the bottom than you have in capitalist
Are you really
countries.
trying to tell me that the Icelandic system of the child of the worker getting the same education as the child of the rich businessman is Soviet communism?
No, I am not.
Or
No.
even will lead to it?
No, I am not saying that. I'm saying something different. I'm saying the principle you expressed, that there's something wrong about some people having higher incomes than others, that there's something wrong about somebody you call a rich man being able to...
Starting out in life.
Well, whether he starts out in life or not, but there's something wrong.
That's the essential thing.
There is no way you can make people equal at their start. What you can do is to give them equal opportunities. You cannot in any way make the child who is born blind equal to the child who is not born blind. You can try to compensate for that, but you cannot start people out equal. And what I am saying is that the principle you're expressing, that there is something wrong with some people ending up at a higher income level than other people.
I'm saying starting out with.
There is no way people can start out the same.
Of course there is.
And
there
no
can
way.
be equal opportunity. I think we've progressed as far as we can with this.
Equal opportunity is what we want. We want everybody to have the same opportunity to take advantage of whatever qualities he has. Some people will accidentally be born with higher qualities. Some people will be lucky in the choice of country they're born in. Some people will be lucky with the parents they get.
But who would pay the vouchers that you mentioned?
Who would pay the vouchers? That's where I went back. It's one thing to have 90% of the people impose taxes on themselves to help the other 10%.
So in effect, people would be paying themselves, because this would be the 90%. Yes.
Right.
Right.
It's a very different thing. And this is where the alternative, to have 80% in the middle, try to impose heavy taxes on these people in order to benefit themselves or the people lower down.
Right. If there's a brief comment on anything we've just been discussing, obviously we cannot raise new issues here, then the floor is yours.
Well, I would just like to mention one thing in this connection. That's about inflation.
Sure.
Professor Tobin has calculated or estimated the cost of the U.S. Lack of work now, unemployment, and excess production capacity of about $500 billion. Is that an overestimation?
What was the cost of the unemployment caused by the inflation?
Well, that was much less.
Was it?
This was the net figure he stated.
No, I beg your pardon. If I remember the calculation you were speaking of, it was an estimate he made some years ago of what would in fact be the cost, not of what it actually has been. And you must realize that in country after country, as inflation has risen, unemployment has gone up, not down. Inflation temporarily reduces unemployment, but after a period, it increases it.
I think you are wrong, because in the countries we have just mentioned that is the most splendid monetarist case, the United Kingdom. You have been trying to control money supply and been rather successful, and still employment is increasing, and the cost of those people being unemployed is rising all the time.
But if you look at the pattern,
and then you must ask, where is the natural level of unemployment? Will they ever reach it?
well, you must ask a different question. Is there an alternative? Is there a way, is there any country which is able to maintain a stable rate of inflation without an increase in unemployment? And the answer is that what happens is if you try to solve the problem by inflation, the inflation tends to get higher and higher and eventually gets out of hand. The implicit assumption in these comments is that there's some third way. But the fact is that once, let me ask you a question. Is there a way you can cure an alcoholic that he doesn't have to go through a very difficult period?
I think you're trying
The real problem is that he became an alcoholic in the first place. And the real problem is that the country started on an inflationary route in the first place.
I think you have the
Society
problem.
being alcoholics.
Mr. Friedman, I must just point that I think you have identified the illness wrongly, because the problem is not inflation. The problem is unemployment and misery.
And how do you solve the unemployment problem without making a larger inflation if you take your point of view? How are you going to solve the
Well, I
unemployment
think
problem?
that it's much easier to
How?
be larger inflation than unemployment.
It's
Well-
much easier to what?
To beat larger inflation than
Than
unemployment.
unemployment.
Much easier to beat larger inflation than
To
unemployment?
live with.
To live with? Where is a country that has lived indefinitely
We
with
have-
higher inflation?
Well,
we have
Israel
a long
is still
history.
living.
We have a long history of rather high rates of inflation and almost
Let
marginal
me go back
unemployment.
for you. What I have always said is that the problem is not the level of inflation, but changes in the rate of inflation. I agree with you that it's perfectly possible if you can have a 30% inflation indefinitely to live with it. The problem is you cannot have a 30% rate of inflation indefinitely. Iceland had a high rate of inflation, but then it tended gradually to creep up. Finally, it got to
that's wrong.
130%.
That's
Calm down.
wrong.
Calm down.
Since last year, it was 130% a year ago.
No, it was not. I
Yes,
mean,
Stefan, you
I
have
think
the final
people
point.
should brief you a bit better about the facts.
You have the final point,
very
Stefan.
colored pictures.
The fact of the matter is that we had for a very long time we've had the inflation for about
I know
14
you
years
had
or
a
something
long
like that.
inflation, that's right.
It was spiraling until last year, which is quite correct.
It was
Since
spiraling up like
has
that.
come down, but
it is
those
to
are the facts.
explain-
Stefan, you have the last word.
Professor Friedman, I've really enjoyed this discussion with you. I only wish I could afford to come to your talk on Saturday. Unfortunately, I can't pay 1,200 kroner this time.
I didn't know what they were charging.
But, and I just want to make it known that I don't consider that an increase in our freedom to hear interesting and provocative ideas, to sell entries to lectures.
Professor Friedman,
I'm sorry.
that's a very difficult question.
I'm sorry. I don't know anything
this
about.
is new in
I
Iceland.
don't
That's
know
why I'm
what's
raising
new
it.
in Iceland. Charging.
The thing is
for these
that
Well, can I put it as
yes.
professor of the university? The University of Iceland has a half a century old tradition of public lectures by academicians and professors or scientists coming from abroad. These are free, open to everybody. Your lecture, unfortunately, is a big break with that tradition. It's the first time that the University of Iceland is a party to selling entrance at such a high price. It's higher even than if the Bolshoi Ballet came to this country.
So obviously you are valued very highly.
Well,
The thing is that we are not familiar with the...
And the point my friend was making